It was Saturday, March 8, 2014. At exactly 12:41 a.m., Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, heading to Beijing, China. It was supposed to be a routine flight, smooth, uneventful. The plane was scheduled to land at 6 a.m. sharp. There were 227 passengers on board and 12 crew members, and flying that plane, one of the most experienced pilots in all of Malaysia. But just 40 minutes after takeoff, something happened. Something no one could have seen coming. A strange, mysterious event that would turn Flight 370 into one of the greatest aviation mysteries in modern history. The plane vanished, completely. No radar signal, no emergency call, no trace. It was like it just disappeared into thin air. Flight 370 was operated using a Boeing 777, a long-haul aircraft with a fuel tank large enough for 7.5 hours of non-stop flight. It was one of Malaysia Airlines' most reliable planes, running 2 daily flights between Malaysia and China. And this exact plane? It had been flying that same route for 11 years, without a single major issue. No mechanical failures, no serious complaints. Everything about it was routine, expected, safe. And sure enough, the flight took off right on time. Weather? Clear. Winds? Calm. Everything was going smoothly. About 40 minutes into the flight, at exactly 1:21 a.m., the plane was cruising over the South China Sea. It was just about to leave Malaysian airspace and enter Vietnam's. At that moment, Malaysian Air Traffic Control radioed the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and gave him the standard instructions to coordinate with Vietnamese controllers. From that point on, they'd take over the monitoring of the flight. Captain Zahari responded with a simple, "All right," and that was the last thing anyone ever heard from the plane. The final word, the final contact. Right after that short exchange, Flight MH370 disappeared from radar screens. It never entered Vietnamese airspace. Panic set in. Both Malaysian and Vietnamese aviation authorities scrambled. They began a joint search for the missing plane. They contacted nearby airports, hoping maybe the aircraft had been forced to land because of a technical failure. But nothing. No signals, no messages, no landings, just silence. It was as if the plane and everyone on board had vanished from the face of the earth. Now listen closely, for the details make the story. At exactly 2 a.m., Malaysian aviation authorities declared a full emergency. They began urgently reaching out to every nearby country, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone had picked up a signal from the missing plane, any sign that it was still out there. That hope stayed alive until 6:30 a.m. That's when Flight MH370 was supposed to land at Beijing Capital International Airport. But it didn't. As the clock kept ticking, the families waiting at the airport started to sense something wasn't right. A delay like this? No explanation. People grew anxious, uneasy. Then, with no contact and no sign of the plane anywhere, Malaysia Airlines was forced to make it official. Flight MH370 was missing. That's when the world snapped to attention. Breaking news coverage around the globe, non-stop headlines, and full-blown panic erupting inside Beijing Airport, especially among the families who'd been waiting for hours, clinging to hope. But the real horror wasn't just that the plane had vanished. It was what came next. The Boeing 777 only had enough fuel for 7.5 hours of flight, and by the time the missing plane was declared, it had just about 2 hours of fuel left, max, which meant If it hadn't landed somewhere by then, it was going down. No fuel, no chance. That realization hit the families like a freight train. Up to that point, many were hoping it was just a technical glitch, a delay, a detour, something fixable. But the mention of fuel running out, that changed everything. Then came another twist. Some of the passengers' families claimed they tried calling their loved ones after the plane was reported missing. And the phones rang. They actually rang, which led many to believe maybe the passengers were still alive. Maybe they were being held somewhere with cell service. And just like that, a new theory took hold. Was the plane hijacked? Were the passengers being held hostage? This only added more pressure to the Malaysian government, who immediately expanded the search. With China's help, they launched a massive joint operation, deploying 34 planes and 40 ships to comb every inch of the area where the plane had last been detected. But by the end of day one, nothing. No debris, no signals, no survivors, just silence. 2 days in, and the search was still coming up empty. That's when new theories started making the rounds. Some believed the plane had exploded mid-air, just minutes after the last recorded contact with air traffic control. Trying to calm the chaos, mobile carriers stepped in with an explanation. The phones that seemed to ring might not have actually connected. International calls can bounce through multiple networks. Sometimes you hear the ringing sound before the other phone even receives the call. That technical detail killed off some of the hope, and more people began to accept a grim reality. Everyone on board might already be gone. The mission now was just to find the wreckage, but even that wasn't happening. Then came March 10th, 2014, and with it, a game-changing twist. A shocking report landed on investigators' desks. Flight MH370 didn't just disappear where the radar signal stopped. It kept flying, but not on its original path. The plane had changed direction completely. This info didn't come from civilian radar. It came from long-range military radar, tracked by the Malaysian Air Force. And for a moment, it felt like hope was back on the table. Maybe now, with this new flight path, they could trace where the plane really went. But that glimmer of hope, it didn't last long, because what came next was an even deeper mystery. Military radar data revealed something shocking. After disappearing from civilian radar, the plane had suddenly changed course, sharply, turning back toward Malaysian airspace. It flew all the way to the skies above Penang, a city on the country's western coast. Then, it changed direction again, this time heading northwest, toward the open sea. It continued flying that way for nearly 30 minutes. And then, just like that, gone. Vanished from military radar too. No trace, no signal. No clue where it went next. Just a flood of questions, heavy ones, and no answers in sight. Why did the pilot suddenly change course? And if the plane returned to Malaysian airspace, why didn't it just land back at Kuala Lumpur, the same airport it took off from? Why was it heading toward the Indian Ocean? Who shut off the plane's communication systems? And why? If it was hijacked, as some began to suspect, why hadn't anyone claimed responsibility? No ransom demands, no statements. And if the pilot was being forced to cooperate, why didn't he send out a single distress signal? The questions just kept piling up. And as the confusion deepened, wild theories started swirling. Then, out of nowhere, a shadowy Chinese group calling itself the Chinese Martyrs Brigade claimed responsibility for the disappearance. They sent a message to several journalists. It read, You kill one of our clan, we will kill 100 of yours in return. But here's the thing. No one had ever heard of this group before. No one's heard from them since. No known members, no online presence, nothing. Authorities quickly dismissed the claim as bogus. But the chaos didn't stop there. Malaysia's Prime Minister at the time, Najib Razak, made a troubling statement. He said the plane's communication systems couldn't have been shut off by accident. Someone on board had to manually turn them off, on purpose. That bombshell split public opinion in two. Option 1. The plane was hijacked, and the pilots were forced to change course. Option 2. One of the pilots did it themselves. So investigators started digging deeper. They began looking into the backgrounds of all 227 passengers, searching for anyone who might have had a motive to hijack the plane. The first major suspicion landed on two young men from Iran, Puria Nur Mohammed and Delavar Sayed Mohammed Reza Y. Because both of them were traveling using stolen passports. Instant red flag. But after a full investigation, it turned out they were just two young guys looking for work, trying to migrate illegally. They had no ties to terrorism and no connection to the disappearance. They were cleared completely. As for the rest of the passengers, nothing suspicious came up. No red flags, no motive. And without any terrorist group stepping forward, no hostages, no demands. There was only one possibility left. The one more and more people started believing. It had to be one of the pilots. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah was 53 years old, a veteran pilot with Malaysia Airlines since 1981. Over 20,000 hours of flight experience, a clean record, no complaints, no incidents. By all accounts, professional, reliable, disciplined. His co-pilot, Fariq Abdul Hamid, was just 27. He had 7 years of experience with the airline and was known for being sharp and capable. Both men had spotless reputations. But the cold truth? Only the pilots had the technical knowledge and the access to shut off the plane's tracking systems and take control of its path. That realization led to a massive effort to dig through both men's personal lives, looking for anything, a clue, a hint, a motive that could help explain this mystery, the one that had now captivated the entire world. Suspicion started to zero in on one man, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, the veteran pilot in full control of Flight MH370. Malaysian authorities didn't waste any time. They raided his home and searched every inch of it. And that's when they found something strange. Inside his house was a full-scale flight simulator, just like the ones used by professional pilots for training. Now, for someone who lived and breathed aviation, this wasn't exactly shocking. Zahari was known for being obsessed with flying. He even had a YouTube channel where he uploaded videos of himself using the simulator. But the real shock came when investigators checked the data stored on the device. They found a saved flight path from just 1 month before the plane disappeared, and it was eerily similar to the actual route MH370 took after going dark. Almost like he'd practiced it, planned it, like he was rehearsing a real-life disappearance. That's when one of the most controversial theories emerged. Captain Zahari had orchestrated the vanishing of Flight 370, down to every last detail. According to this theory, he knew the exact moment the plane would be unmonitored, right at the handoff point between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace. A blind spot, no direct surveillance. The perfect window to change course without raising any alarms. Then it gets darker. Some experts believed Zahari depressurized the cabin, causing a sudden drop in oxygen. Not enough to explode the plane, but just enough to knock everyone unconscious. In situations like that, oxygen masks automatically drop from above the seats. But here's the catch. Passenger masks only last about 15 minutes. The pilot's mask? Way longer. So after just a few minutes, everyone on board would have passed out, peacefully, unknowingly. And with everyone unconscious, Zahari could have lowered the aircraft to a breathable altitude and carried out the rest of his plan. Alone. In total silence. As for why he turned the plane back over Malaysia, some say it was a final goodbye, a quiet tribute to his homeland, especially since he flew directly over Penang, his hometown. But even if we accept this theory, the burning question remains, why? Why would a man his age, a respected pilot, a father, a grandfather, a man who lived for flying, do something like this? And even if he was behind it, where was he planning to go? He couldn't just fly into another country. Airspace is tracked. He'd have been intercepted instantly. Days passed. The search continued, but hope began to fade. People slowly started accepting that the passengers were gone. And yet, no one knew where their journey had ended. All the world had was a mystery getting deeper by the hour, and a vast, unforgiving Indian Ocean that felt like chasing a needle in a haystack. The Indian Ocean is the third largest ocean on Earth. Its massive size meant that finding the plane was practically impossible. But then, on March 15, 2014, a week after the disappearance, something big happened. A British company called Immersive, which specializes in satellite communications, came forward with a key piece of information. Turns out, the plane had onboard systems that connected with their satellites. And those systems were still pinging even after MH370 disappeared. These weren't full data transmissions. They were more like heartbeat pulses, sent every hour. The strange part, these pulses didn't include exact coordinates, but they did prove one thing. The plane was still active for hours after going dark. Using this signal data, experts ran complex calculations. Pulse timing, estimated speed, fuel limits, possible flight paths, and after crunching the numbers, they identified a possible crash zone in the Indian Ocean, off the western coast of Australia. But the problem? That area was massive, 110 kilometers long, 225 kilometers wide, right in the middle of nowhere, no islands, no traffic, just ocean. And so began the largest and most expensive search operation in the history of civil aviation. Thousands of square kilometers were scoured, by air and by sea, searching for a plane, for answers, for closure. And yet to this day, we still don't know what really happened. The search zone they'd identified, the one they believed the plane had crashed into, was nearly 1,400 kilometers from the nearest land. That land? The coast of Australia. And that distance was the first major obstacle. Just getting Australian ships to the search site took 2 full days of sailing. But distance wasn't the biggest problem. Time was. Experts believed the plane had gone down a full week earlier. Add 2 more days for travel, and you've got 9 days since the crash. And in the ocean world, 9 days is a lifetime. The sea is unforgiving. Waves, currents, wind. Any debris from the crash could have drifted far from the original site. They might have been searching in the completely wrong place. Still, despite the odds, Australia, a country that had no direct connection to the tragedy, stepped up in a big way. They pledged $60 million to help fund the search. and they deployed their best air and naval teams, supporting Malaysia and China's ongoing efforts. Once they reached the search zone, the focus shifted to one critical piece of evidence: the black box. Every plane's black box is equipped with a special device called a ULB, an underwater locator beacon. As soon as it hits water, it starts sending out a high-pitched ping, kind of like an underwater heartbeat. And if you're close enough, within 1.5 kilometers, you can pick it up. Simple idea, right? Get close enough, catch the ping, find the plane. But there was a catch. The ULB's battery only lasts 30 days, and they were already 9 days in. That left just 21 days to find it, before it went silent forever. The race was on. For 15 days, search teams scoured the ocean with everything they had. Nothing. Then, out of nowhere, they picked up a strange signal. Everyone froze, eyes locked on tracking monitors. Could this be it? Was this the black box, calling out from the depths? Hope surged, but it didn't last. After analyzing the signal, they discovered it wasn't the black box. It was just noise, interference from the sonar equipment on the ships themselves, a false alarm, and with that, the one glimmer of hope vanished. Days kept passing. The battery kept draining. The countdown ticked away. Until day 30. And then, silence. No signal. No black box. Nothing. But by then, Flight MH370 wasn't just an aviation mystery. It had become a global human tragedy, and a cause that touched the world. While search crews kept sweeping the ocean, scientists and independent researchers joined in, trying to help however they could. One group from Curtin University in Australia came up with a new angle. They analyzed recordings from underwater microphones, called hydrophones, planted all along the Australian coast. They were originally meant to detect earthquakes, but maybe, just maybe, they'd picked up something else. And guess what? They had. The team found a strange underwater signal, recorded 1 hour and 15 minutes after the plane's last known contact. Could it be the sound of the plane hitting the water? It looked promising, until another group came forward. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, yes, the global body that monitors nuclear tests, announced they had picked up the same signal, but from a completely different location, a much farther one. So now there were two theories. One, the search teams were combing the wrong part of the ocean. Two, the mysterious sound wasn't from the plane at all, but from natural seismic activity, deep in the ocean floor. The confusion only deepened. Conflicting data, no solid proof, just more theories, more noise. In the end, the search teams decided to ignore the signals entirely and continue scouring the original target zone. But the mood had shifted. Time was running out. Answers were nowhere in sight, and every passing day made the truth feel more distant and more painful. Day 40 since Flight MH370 vanished. Australia, Malaysia, and China came together once again and made a tough decision. The next phase of the search would involve cutting-edge sonar technology and deep-sea autonomous submarines to explore the depths of the Indian Ocean in the area where the plane was most likely to have gone down. But there was a major problem. Nobody knew anything about that part of the ocean floor. Almost 99% of the area had never been mapped. No idea how deep it was, what kind of terrain they'd face, or what dangers might be waiting down there. Still, they had no choice. They gambled everything. The subs dove into the darkness, and the sonar scans lit up the underwater world. But what they found wasn't a plane, just old shipwrecks and scattered lumps of coal. For 15 months straight, the team searched non-stop. They scanned over 60,000 square kilometers beneath the waves and found nothing. Then came the day that changed everything. July 29th, 2015. Over a year after the plane disappeared, a group of young people were walking along the beach on Réunion Island, a small French territory west of the Indian Ocean. That's when they spotted something strange. A large, white, metallic object washed up on the shore. It looked like part of a plane. They immediately alerted the authorities, and soon, international investigators were flying in, including a special team from Malaysia. After careful analysis, the truth was confirmed. It was from MH370, finally, a physical piece of the plane. Proof that the aircraft had crashed into the Indian Ocean. That discovery led Malaysia's Prime Minister to make a heartbreaking announcement. There was no chance, not even a 1% hope, that anyone on board had survived. News of the wreckage caught the attention of one man in particular, Blaine Gibson, an adventurer, a deep-sea wreck hunter, and someone who suddenly felt this mystery was now his responsibility to help solve. He started thinking scientifically. If that large piece ended up on Réunion Island, then maybe, just maybe, other debris had drifted in the same direction. Blaine reached out to ocean current experts, and they told him something interesting. The winds and currents during that time would have pushed debris toward the coasts of Mozambique and Madagascar. He didn't wait. Blaine flew there himself, searching beaches, climbing rocks, digging through sand, all on foot, alone, and believe it or not, he found 20 strange pieces of wreckage. After expert analysis, 7 of them were confirmed to be parts of MH370's fuselage, but the pieces were small, like crumbs of the aircraft. The larger, heavier sections, the heart of the plane, were still missing, still out there, somewhere on the ocean floor. Despite the tireless efforts of dozens of countries and over $200 million spent. In 2017, the official search was finally called off. 3 long years. No closure, no answers. And with that, the curtain closed on one of the most mysterious and haunting disasters in aviation history. It started as a routine flight and became a global obsession. To this day, MH370 still stirs curiosity, debate, and endless theories. But the full truth? It's still buried deep beneath the ocean, waiting. If this story gave you chills, you're gonna love the tale of the ghosts of Flight 401, another true, bizarre aviation mystery that'll blow your mind. And don't miss The Miracle of the Andes, a jaw-dropping survival story after a plane crash in the middle of frozen mountains. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. See you in the next story. Stay curious.